Your word, O Lord, is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. Amen. These days, time has taken on a very strange quality. On the one hand, as we long for this season of pandemic to come to an end, it seems to crawl. And on the other hand, suddenly, summer has disappeared completely in the rearview mirror, and September is more than half gone. How can we have been living in this weird world for 7 whole months? This world that looks the same, and yet it is not. Where the people in our lives are still there, but our means of interacting with them are so different. Where we've gotten used to wearing masks and giving one another wide berths on sidewalks and in parking lots, where so much of what we have always taken for granted is now out beyond our reach. Non-anxious air travel, working together in an office, hugging friends when we meet them for dinner in a restaurant, attending big family weddings, graduations, birthday parties, singing in the choir. Though you and I have not gone anywhere, still, we have been displaced, haven't we? The geography of our lives, the interiors of our homes, the streets where we live, the routes we walk our dogs, all of that hasn't changed. Yet we are exiled from life as it was 7 months ago. We are in a wilderness. So, naturally, sometimes we complain about how hard it is, about all the things we miss, the things we and our loved ones have lost. It's also not surprising that our complaining occasionally tips over into blaming. I mean, couldn't this crisis have been handled better? Truth be told, I think part of that is actually transference. What we are really mad about is that a deadly virus is continuing to run rampant in our world, continuing to scare us out of our minds. It's possible, no, it's probable, that it wouldn't be so bad if different decisions were being made. Nonetheless, this truly is a plague of biblical proportions. So maybe all of us 21st century, first world, generally well off, reasonably successful, and mostly in control of our lives types, maybe we have a lot more in common than one might think with those Hebrew refugees that we heard about in this morning's first reading from Exodus. That bunch of fractious former slaves who barely escaped with their lives through this narrow space that has opened up when a strong wind somehow miraculously parted a body of water. Maybe we can cut them a little slack, even if they have only been out there wandering for 1 month. That's a little detail that precedes today's reading. We can cut them a little slack when they are clearly just so done with it. Maybe we won't be so quick to roll our eyes as they talk about how they would really rather have died by the flesh pots back there in Egypt, because at least there they had enough to eat. Maybe you and I can have a bit more sympathy for how quickly they have forgotten that all the way back at the burning bush, God said to Moses, I have observed the misery of my people, and I know their sufferings. Maybe when we notice that the word complaining, which also translates as groaning, appears 7 times in this passage, we really do get it. We can feel them, right? Well, apparently, God does too. Because instead of smacking them down as ingrates, which God will do later on when they complain and disobey, instead, God, from this dazzling cloud out there in the middle of the wilderness, promises daily bread for every single one of them. Bread that will rain down from heaven every morning. And at twilight, they will have meat to eat. So, dinner that night was really great. All these birds flew in and landed everywhere. Roast quail. It almost served itself. But the next morning, God's provision appeared in a form that wasn't quite so obvious. This fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost, covering the ground, that turned out to be really delicious and nutritious. So what was it? Well, that's literally what manna, or manhu, the Hebrew, means. Manna means, what is this? It may well have been these white drops that appear on the green stems of desert shrub that's found all over the Middle East called Haloxylon salicornicum. The drops are the digestive byproduct, that means excretions, of insects that feed on the plant's sap. The secretion, formed at night, is loaded with sugar. The sweet liquid hardens in the form of these white granules, and it's still collected from spring to early fall in many places in the Middle East. And it has been called manna for centuries. Apparently, medieval Iranians in Quran writings mentioned it, and so did a 16th century French naturalist who visited St. Catherine's Monastery on Sinai. So this could be the scientific answer, at least, to what is this? God's daily bread could have arrived in this form that was so not what they expected, looking unlike any bread that they had ever seen. These people who had been slaves in Egypt, where the baking of bread was a fine art, where there were apparently 57 different kinds, according to one Torah commentary. God's provision for them could have been that hard to recognize at first. And then there were the rules that came with it. You couldn't accumulate this stuff or the security that would represent. No 2 months worth of manna over there in the pantry closet. No hoarding. And no possible access to the means of production. Manna could only be gathered daily, except on the day before the Sabbath, when apparently its spoilage properties were suspended. On the day before the people, at God's insistence, were to rest, then and only then, manna had a shelf life, and they could gather 2 days' worth. Now, the implications of this miracle of manna are substantial. And I'm calling it a miracle because where is it written that something is only miraculous when it cannot be explained any other way? There are theological implications, there are ethical implications, and there are surviving a pandemic 1 day at a time implications. What it implies theologically is that God, the Creator, to whom our scriptures bear witness, has fashioned an earth that can and does sustain life. God gives a world that gives. Its fecundity is quite staggering when you think about it. What the miracle implies ethically is that everyone gets to eat. Hoarding is not only destructive, it is contrary to our vocation as human beings called into relationship with the God who intends that we share with one another and allow the earth and ourselves, all of us, to rest. And each of these deserves its own sermon. It is the surviving the pandemic one day at a time implications of manna that are most helpful for you and I at this moment, at this strange, strange time. And they all center around the constancy of divine provision. God is going to provide for you and for me every day. God is going to rain down manna. And so, every day, yours and my question has to be, what is it? What is it? What is manna today? If we don't ask that question, we might not recognize it, because manna doesn't arrive in ways that we expect. I'm talking about a practice here, a habit of going out and looking for and gathering up what God gives. Like Middle East manna, the digestive byproduct of bugs, it may well present itself in some pretty simple, humble forms. It may be one of those lessons that you can only learn in the wilderness, like how fragile you are, how gracious this earth is, how even in the silence and emptiness, there is so much to see and hear. It may be a new appreciation for what is right in front of us. On a Zoom call yesterday with members of our stewardship team, we shared with one another the blessings of COVID. For one, it was more time for music. For another, it was a greater cherishing of loved ones. And yet for another, it was a repurposing of unused space in a family home that is making creativity possible. Manna may be an unexpected peak experience. Those are possible, even in this weird, weird world of COVID. It also may be no more than having found the strength to get through the day without blowing up at somebody. This wilderness, this exile, this displacement that we are all experiencing is hard. It is stressful. And we really don't know how long, oh Lord, how long. So all we can do is start each day with the intention of going out there and collecting some manna, of seeking out that which is going to feed our souls. We have to go and collect it fresh every day. Because remember, manna doesn't keep, except on the Sabbath, whatever that is for you. And I promise you, and way more importantly, God promises you that it is out there. It is out there waiting for you. In the name of the God who creates and redeems and sustains.